it's unlikely that President-elect Trump actually thinks that we're going to become the 51st state. This is more of his positioning around economic issues that he's really quite concerned with, and primarily that would include the trade deficit that exists between Canada and the U.S. That has been a bee in his bonnet for years, and he is really doubling down on opportunities that he sees to leverage the power of the U.S. economy in North America. And so we're hearing a lot of political rhetoric from him, the Greenland piece, the Canada being the 51st state piece, and similar issues. But I do think it's important for Canadian politicians to give a good pushback. And I'm glad that we've seen that from multiple different political parties. We're really seeing a return to what we call friendshoring, which is where we are trying to relocate manufacturing within our domestic borders, as opposed to relying on our trading partners to bring in goods and services that they can offer. And friendshoring is really looking to relocate those sources of goods and supply to either friends to the north and south of us, closer to us, or well within. The Greenland piece is interesting. I do think it's again political rhetoric. I don't really expect that President-elect believes that there's any meaningful chance that Greenland would become somehow owned by or controlled by the U.S. I know that there have been some discussions in Europe about this issue, and certainly it looks as though it's another instance of him positioning the sense that the economy in the U.S. is so strong that one could be very bullish about foreign policies, even if candidly they don't necessarily make a lot of sense.
Martha, Laura's watching us right now live on LinkedIn and in our live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. She says, well, if Donald Trump doesn't value what Canada brings to the table, then maybe we should just remove it from the table. There's a lot of saber rattling that's happening right now. Trump yesterday saying that he doesn't think that Americans should import Canadian lumber or Canadian automobiles, which is a huge deal if you start to, and you can take us into that, if you start to look at Canada's exports and what the Americans bring in and the billions and billions of dollars that are at stake. Sure, the knee-jerk reaction as a Canadian is to say, well, maybe it's time we turn off the taps. Maybe we don't send you crude oil. Maybe you don't have the water security you think you have. Maybe we're not sending our power to California. Thoughts with California right now with those wildfires. But again, that's kind of nailing your own feet to the floor, isn't it? It's counterproductive.
You know, one of the best outcomes of what is now called the CUSMA, which started as the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement and then eventually became the NAFTA, which included Mexico. One of the best outcomes is the interreliance and the sort of the reliance in the supply chain, the supply chain strategies as between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. And if we're looking at this from an economic and a trade perspective, the fact is it would be very counterproductive for Canada to actually try to cut off the U.S. from its trading partnership or try to dramatically reduce it. There's nothing wrong, and in fact, it has been advanced as a positive strategy for Canadian businesses. There's nothing wrong with diversification of supply chains. In other words, Canadian entities, Canadian sectors, manufacturing companies, exporters, and importers looking for alternative sources of partnerships outside of North America. In fact, most would say that's a prudent thing to do for Canadian industry to ensure that not all their eggs are in one basket. Frequently, all the eggs of Canadian sectors are in the US basket. And so to the extent that we have unforeseen or unexpected policy changes, for example, a 25% tariff on our goods going into the US, it's very helpful to have alternative partners. Tariffs are effectively a tax on imported goods. One of the main, in fact, arguably the biggest purpose of a free trade agreement is to eliminate tariffs so that there is, as the name suggests, free trade between nations. So looking at that at a very high level, what that means is I can ship something to the US that I make in Canada, and my US partner can import it into the US without paying customs duties, which are effectively a tax. that makes supply chain management not only more efficient, but also much more affordable, which meaningfully impacts the bottom line of corporations, importers, and businesses all over North America. So, all over the CUSMA area, Canada, US, and Mexico. And small, medium, and large size enterprises have built their supply chain and their economic strategies around that concept of free trade. And that includes businesses all around the United States, which will be dramatically impacted by this change in tariff policy. So, what this would mean if a 25% tariff were added to all of Canadian product imports into the U.S. is that the U.S. importer, so not a government, not the Canadian government, but the US importer, usually a business, can be a small business as well. They are going to pay an additional 25% tax on that good based on the value of that good. And most of the time, profit margins will not accommodate an additional unexpected 25% cost on that good. So, what that means to all businesses in the US that will rely on and that do rely on goods coming in from Canada is that there will be, in many instances, an impossibility to remain profitable on those transactions because the importer is going to have to absorb a 25% tax that wasn't accommodated and wasn't contemplated in their costing, in their purchase price, for example.